And I'm delighted to introduce Damien Shoga, who has worked for UKspace for 8 years, running the social media and for us. And thank goodness he does, because he does a fantastic job of it, getting our message out there. The message, this talk, as you just heard, will be recorded and it will be put onto our website. And the recording has started now, just so that you're aware. So I will pass over to you, Damien. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll start my presentation. Can everyone see my screen? Excellent. As you'll be aware, the title of this presentation is around promoting your company through traditional and digital media. So, as Penelope said, for the last few years, I've been working with UKspace, and I work with other companies outside the space sector as well, and supporting them in different aspects of digital communications and marketing. So hopefully some of that experience can be shared with you today. I'll be very happy to take questions. Perhaps easier if we do those at the end. You can put those in the chat and I'll answer them at the end, in case your question is answered during the presentation. So, key question is, why is it worth investing time and effort and sometimes budget in promoting your company or organization? So for me, there are a number of reasons. The first is to raise awareness of a company and its activities. The second is to position the company and its senior leaders as experts in their field. So the third is to help win new business. Ultimately, all the marketing activities you do should be with your bottom line in mind. So with these objectives in mind, we'll look at the tools to deliver them. So in terms of defining what media relations is or are, Wikipedia describes it as referring to the relationship that a company or organization develops with journalists. While to distinguish it from public relations, that is about extending the relationship beyond the media to the general public. Now, this includes written, and as we know today with the impact of digital media, with everyone from every age, from toddlers using iPads and touchscreens up to senior citizens, the older members of our population, also using those facilities in a much easier way. The visual communication is absolutely critical these days. So media relations is about harnessing the written and the visual messaging and content in one. So as you can see from the diagram on the right-hand side, media relations should be at the heart of your activities, but it should be affecting and dictating all these areas around it. So press releases, media contacts, journalists, the infographics that you're using, the photos you select, how you communicate on social media, what your website's saying, how you plan to deal in a crisis, in advance of a crisis happening, or in the eventuality of a crisis, and also how you want to position yourself and your company as a thought leader. So there are two aspects to building media relations. The first is around relationships and cultivating those relationships between your company, your senior managers, your directors, your board, if you have one, and then those in the media. So that can be journalists. Nowadays it's bloggers and influencers as well. At specific media and publications and websites that suit your company. And I'll go into more detail on this in due course. And as I mentioned earlier, it's also around raising profile and awareness of what you and your company are doing. So 5 areas to demonstrate the value of undertaking media relations. So a good campaign will result in the following. It will help you generate coverage. So if you've got news items or new appointments or anything you want to share which is of genuine public interest, that will be done, with the objective of gaining media coverage. So that could be through sector media, so the industry media in which you operate, on which you're delivering projects. It could be broadsheets, so that's the national media or international media, newspapers generally, and also broadcasts, so through TV, radio, and increasingly podcasts. Again, to reiterate, it will also, by undertaking media relations, it will also position your company as a leader in its field. So everyone is always looking to find ways to distinguish themselves from the competition. And by you demonstrating your expertise through your own media coverage, as well as being sought by journalists to comment on things, you will be seen as a leader in your sector. And by extension, when I say you as a leader, it's the company, but also the individuals. So it could be C-suite individuals, so CEO, CFO, Chief Technology Officer, etc. It could be project managers as well. So someone leading a significant project or program in the business, especially with, for example, if your company is engaged in a significant ESA program or program with UK Space Agency, you'll have a project manager or a program manager who is of a certain standing, and though they may not be at exec level, they're definitely worth putting in front of the media, helping raise their profile and demonstrating the wider expertise of the company. The fourth relates to the last couple of points, where by undertaking media relations, your engagement with journalists increase, and over time, you will be sought proactively by journalists, hopefully, for your expert comment. So a journalist may be writing a piece about the space industry in general, or a particular aspect of satellite technology, or innovation, or young people getting into the space sector. And depending on what you've been sharing with the media in the past, they may see you as an appropriate expert to comment, and it's another opportunity for your name and your company to be in the press. And the fifth one is around crisis management. In the eventuality that any type of crisis, be it financial, be it a natural disaster, something which impacts your business directly, it's how you deal with that. And having a media plan to deal with a potential crisis is critical in this day and age. So as I mentioned earlier, there are two aspects to, in terms of the key ingredients required for a media relations campaign, and those are the messaging and then the associated ways in which you deliver those messages. So for messages, you need to think about, how is your company distinguishing itself from the competition? You should have some brand values that, again, define how your company behaves and what your business objectives are. And this is then communicated through messaging, which you're putting out consistently throughout all your media materials. This will help. This should be reflected through delivery of written and visual content as well. And also, if you have an opportunity to interviews, again, the messaging that you're sharing through those interviews should be consistent with the messaging you're putting out as written content in your own press releases. So the types of written content are press releases, which I'm sure some or all of you will be familiar with, thought leadership articles, social media content, that could be on any of the main platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., and marketing collateral. Throughout all of these, your key messages, be they a high-level brand level, so what are the tenets of the company, should be included, as well as if you're communicating about a project delivery or a significant milestone. Again, those messages should be consistent, whether you're issuing it through a press release, through an associated article, through social media, or through the marketing collateral that you may be publishing and distributing at a conference or exhibition. So continuing the key ingredients of media relations, as I mentioned, visual content is critical as well. It's not purely about the writing these days. And again, the photos that you choose should reflect the USP of the company and your key business activities. There's no point sharing, for example, on your website or in a press release, a picture of young people innovating or contributing if you don't have anyone of that age in the company. It just won't reflect your company, won't reflect your brand values. So it's really critical to think about these things when you're choosing imagery and other visual content. So photography is obviously one which you can, depending on budget, you can commission original photography and artist impressions. There's also royalty-free imagery, which can be bought at quite a low price, from anything from £5 or £6 per image. That would be a one-off cost, which you can then use forever within the terms of the license. And then there are also some very good stock libraries which are totally free, such as Pexels, Pixabay, and Unsplash, where you've got thousands and thousands of photos at your usage for downloading, and supplemented by ESA's own significant image library, which has vast numbers of imagery and videos that you can use and download for your own media purposes, as long as you credit them accordingly. Again, visual content stretches beyond photos and goes into infographics. So using something like Canva, which is a free tool, you can create infographics which visually display potentially complicated concepts. And again, you can do it in a way which ensures that any infographic you produce is consistent in its style and is reflecting your company's brand values, brand identity, etc. So anyone that sees it will immediately associate it with your company. And video again, if you want to use video, there are, again, if you have the budget, you can commission original video content. And as there are with photos, there are some very good sites where you can also purchase video content at a quite cost-effective price. So just some information now around how would I go about writing a press release. And I know from our experience at UKspace, inevitably the larger organisations, the members, they have communications teams in place. They have people who can write press releases and share press releases on quite a regular basis, while the SMEs and startups may not have the resource or understanding about how to write a press release. So hopefully some of these tips and tools will encourage people to think about their media relations plans and have the confidence to write a press release. So the 5 W's is where to start: the who, what, when, where, and why. Without each of these, you probably haven't got a story. So if you can answer those 5, then that's the best place to start in terms of structuring your story, which you're going to turn into a press release, which will be of interest to journalists. Second part is ensuring the information is clearly and efficiently communicated. And this goes with a third point where we really need to avoid jargon. A lot of journalists may not be, some will be specialists in their field, others will be not be specialists, but will have gone from one desk to another. So maybe excellent journalists, but don't necessarily have the in-depth sector and industry understanding at that stage. They may be developing it. So avoiding jargon is crucial. And goes back to, it's tied in with the second point, whereby if a journalist can get an immediate understanding of what you're trying to say, they will read on. And if they don't, if it's cluttered, if it's complicated, complex language, you're not going to hear back from them at all. And they're going to, as the journalists say, they're going to spike it. And that'll be the end of your press release and any chance of media coverage for that particular item. I should add, though, obviously the nature of the space sector is there is a lot of technical language. There are some quite complicated concepts. So if technical language is needed, by all means explain it. You can put it in notes to editors. So there's an opportunity for the end reader, i.e. the journalist, to understand what is more about that particular item. A huge bugbear of mine is that when I'm just reading outside of our industry, acronyms, there's an expectation that everyone knows what an acronym stands for. It's just not the case. So the rule is, golden rule is, spell out the acronym the first time, and then after that with a bracketed acronym, and after that you can just use the acronym each time in further references throughout the press release. Now this is really important. A quote is an opportunity to reflect a bit of personality from whoever's giving the quote, whoever it's attributed to. So it's about firstly finding the right person to give that quote. Often it could be a CEO, but as I mentioned earlier, it might also be a project or program manager. It could be a technical person. So think about who the most appropriate person is for the quote, and then ensure that the quote is relevant and concise. There's nothing worse than seeing 3 paragraphs of a quote. It's never going to be included. So the clearer and more concise it is, the more likely that the quote will be included. And this is also about showing credibility. So it's not just providing dry facts in the press release, but actually going into a bit more detail and showing some credibility from the person and the company. So again, going back to the earlier points made around use of imagery and videos, press releases, wherever possible and as much as possible, I really recommend that you include an image with your press release that you send out. And this should be large enough initially to use for online usage, so that's at 72 dpi. And then also just include a note saying, if the journalist is looking to use it for print, please, you know, that a print quality image is available. The reason I wouldn't include a print quality initially is because sometimes they could be 3, 4, 5, or even 10 plus megabytes, while a digital version is likely to be well under a megabyte, maybe even a couple of 100K. So you don't want to be stuffing up people's mailboxes with large image files. Point 7 is a really crucial one. If you've got a press release that it could be about agri-tech and the use of satellite technologies to support farmers, straight away that's potentially relevant to space sector publications, agricultural publications, technology journalists, and media covering the engineering sector. So by all means, have 4 versions of your press release. There'll be the core content, but the beginning, the introduction to your press release, the first paragraph, or even the title will change according to who you're distributing it to. If you send a generic press release with agricultural terminology and stuff to a technology or a satellite technology publication, you're going to get much less engagement than you are by sending that to an agricultural or farming magazine or correspondent. Likewise, if you include lots of complicated satellite related language and send that all to an agricultural publication, again, you're going to get little engagement. So think about who your target audience is, i.e. the journalist or journalists, and you can have multiple versions of the same press release. Obviously on your website, if you're including the press release, you will have the most wide-ranging generic version of it. So that's certainly something to consider. And just a point to make, that a lot of journalists, they get many press releases from many different organizations, and for them to decide which to use, there'll be various criteria. So if your press release adheres to all the suggested items above, there's every chance it will be published exactly as it is, often without any changes. So this is something to bear in mind, that if you're happy with your press release to be in the press exactly as you issue it, then that's often something that might happen. So the different channels that you should be considering to share news will be newspapers, so both national and regional, could even be international depending on your client base, and supplements as well. Supplements are a great way to be able to go into more detail. So for example, if the Saturday or Sunday newspapers are including something about an aspect of space, be it manned space or space tourism, anything like that, which will have an interest to the wider general public, then you may have news or upcoming delivery milestones which could be of interest to features editors. So consider what supplements might be appropriate to the work you're doing at any time. Second is magazine. These are usually industry or sector led. Again, goes back to my earlier point about if you're sending a press release to a national newspaper, it's going to be more generic than one to a sector specific. So again, think about which magazines your potential customers are reading, and find those and the relevant contacts in those publications. TV is another media channel. Again, you need to think about the level of news. So if it's a small contract win, this is not going to be of significant interest to TV. If obviously you're involved in a multi-million or multi-billion pound program that you're making a significant contribution to, there's every chance that this could be of interest to TV, both in the region in which you're working and more broadly at national level and potentially internationally. The same applies for radio, although there are some also increasingly specialist radio programs and channels that you might want to also consider targeting. And finally, podcasts. Again, I mentioned earlier that this is a rapidly accelerating area of the media. I'm sure everyone's noticed throughout COVID that this has really grown in popularity as people have sought new ways to consume content, be it news or features, and podcasts are a very good channel for you to consider as part of your media relations activity. So media lists. So as part of your media relations activity, you should have a list of journalists and publications that you want to target. So thinking about sectors in which you work, the type of work you're doing, and then identifying the most relevant journalists. Again, you may have a list of 20 or 50 or even 100 journalists. It would not be appropriate to send all of them every press release. So again, judge each press release on its own merits, consider the content of the press release, and then work out your distribution list accordingly for that particular press release. It's really important and often quite difficult to keep media distribution lists up to date. Journalists move from publications to others. So once you've established a relationship, just because that journalist moves doesn't mean you let them go. There's every chance they'll still be covering your sector or related sector, so try and keep in touch with them. And additionally, get their successes details. You've established a relationship with the publication. There's every opportunity for you to continue that, albeit with a different journalist working at that magazine or newspaper. And don't let your media contacts list be exclusive to journalists and reporters. You know, often at UKspace we get approached by program producers and directors, and increasingly there are, you know, in the social media sphere, there are bloggers and influencers who are well worth including on your media list, and will, you know, have a different reach to the traditional media, but often a really important reach as well that you can tap into. So having thought about the types of media, the journalists, now we're going to look at the distribution channels. So nowadays, I think we all receive personalized emails through email marketing. I'm not talking about one-to-one, I'm talking about you're signed up, you're subscribed to a particular, it could be a consumer brand, it could be some thought leadership content, and more often than not, you'll receive that as a Dear Damien, Dear Penelope, etc. This is important for journalists as well. They want to feel like they're receiving a personalized email rather than just a Dear Nobody, here's our press release. Now, you can do that through an email marketing tool such as MailChimp or Constant Contact. And that allows you to not only personalize, but brand the email as well. So you can have your logo on there, you can have a branded header. It also allows you to track who's opened it and what they've clicked on. You can also share your press release through syndication services. So this is basically to reach a much broader audience than your focused media list. And this can often be quite costly. So I would consider this mainly if you've got a significant announcement that you think could generate some business interest. And some examples of the in syndication options are Newswire, Viewleo, BusinessWire, Cision and RealWire, and their costs vary depending on how many publications you're trying to reach, whether it's just in the UK, whether it's just in the sector, whether it's international, but it's worth going and looking at these options and working out what fits your budget. The next distribution channel is one that you basically manage yourself. That's social media. So this is a great way of posting your press release with an appropriate image, tagging people, tagging companies, encouraging them to share themselves, to spread your message as widely as possible. And this should be high up on your general media relations plan, as well as your social media activities. And finally, you can use a PR agency, either on a retained basis or ad hoc basis, whereby you have, you might be attending a major event or having a major announcement, and you need support to get some really focused assistance and expertise to generate some coverage. And the main benefit of a PR agency is that obviously they've got additional resource and expertise, but they're also likely to have very good relationships with particular journalists and publications that you're looking to tap into. So underpinning all your media relations activity should be a content and editorial schedule. This ultimately is a solid foundation on which everything should be built. And it's not just about the press releases you're planning, but includes all your social media activity too, all your social media activity too, and extends to your, what goes on the website in relation to media relations too. I would suggest that this is done on a 3, 6, 12-month basis with a quarterly review and update. So as you move through each year, be it calendar or financial, you're ensuring that the whole time the editorial schedule is being updated, and you're considering what content and channels and targets you're going to be engaging with. So your editorial plan, what should it include? Include events you're attending or presenting at, be they conferences or exhibitions, Customer milestones could be a launch of a satellite, it could be delivery of technology, it could be, it might not be a customer milestone, it might be a contract win. Now, thinking more broadly outside your company, you should also consider in your editorial plan relevant national and international events. So for example, it could be the G7 summit or COP26, where you have an opportunity to talk about the impacts and value that the space sector plays on sustainability and climate change. These are all things whereby that where you have an opportunity to either put your own statements out or approach journalists, say if you're looking for comment on, then there are prime opportunities to be commenting on. And as we know, every day there seems to be a different national, international day for something. Of particular possible reference to this group will be things like National Apprenticeship Week, World Space Week, Earth Day, World Creativity and Innovation Day. Again, there are websites that detail what all these days are, and some days are international, some are UK, some are US, etc., etc. For example, there's Cybersecurity Month coming up, so that might be relevant to some organisations. And think about, okay, how can we piggyback on this activity? There'll be hashtags on social media. It's an opportunity for you to engage in the conversation, be part of the conversation, demonstrate your expertise. You may not have any press release or anything like that to be pushing at the time, but you may have some case studies or previous news that you can associate with that particular day, week, month of interest. So just to reiterate around social media, this is a great way to broadcast your content quickly, cheaply, and effectively. Again, for those of you who haven't started your social media activities yet, or even if you have, it's really important you focus on the quality of the content rather than the quantity. I think there's been a move away from, we've got to publish X number of posts a day or a week, and more focus now on the quality of the content. Often writing a post in 280 characters can be quite difficult to ensure you've captured your point succinctly. So better that it's of a quality and offers value to the end user than just bombarding people with a lot of cheaper quality posts, which they're going to switch off from. To reiterate what I said in the previous slide, the editorial schedule should feed into this, but there'll be ad hoc activities. So it could be that someone you follow or a company you follow have posted something that you want to like, comment, share on, etc. This should be in addition to your planned frequency of posting of your own content. And in terms of how best to manage your social media, you can do it directly through the likes of LinkedIn and Twitter, both of which now have some really robust analytics tools as well, which are free. What you can't do on those is schedule content. So if you want to schedule content, something like Hootsuite is a good tool and is, very affordable even for startups. It starts at, I think, about £40 a month, and gives you the option to not only schedule content but have streams, which you can see in the image on the right hand side. So for example, you can see your home stream, what people have retweeted of your own content, where you've been mentioned. You can also just monitor competitors or politicians, or it could be anyone who has an account on Twitter or LinkedIn or elsewhere that you're following. You can include all in a consolidated dashboard, which is provided by Hootsuite. So that's where we end the presentation. So if you have any questions, I'll be delighted to try and answer those. I hope that's been of value. do we have any questions?
Can't see anything there, Damien. Oh, somebody.
Thanks, Robin.
Okay, if no one has any questions, if you do have questions and you want to contact Damien separately, we did say that, you know, he will do one-to-ones. Oh, question coming. He will do one-to-ones with people if you've got specific things you'd like to cover in a bit more detail, or perhaps help with a particular campaign. Meanwhile, Robin is about to post a question for you. Yeah. Can you see that, Damien?
Yes. Is there a social media platform that is better for B2B, business to business? I think for me, LinkedIn is the best platform for B2B activities. And again, for if you're not familiar with all the functionality that LinkedIn offers, there are specialist groups on there, as well as your own personal profile. You can be part of groups, contribute, not contribute, just monitor, gain market intelligence through those groups. So that's a great way of increasing your knowledge and sharing your own knowledge with other people. Twitter is good as well. I would use it to supplement LinkedIn rather than instead of. If you only have time and resource to manage one channel, I would definitely recommend LinkedIn. But Twitter is also very good for B2B. Instagram is obviously growing, or has significant reach, but is more with consumer brands, I would suggest. And one of the downsides of Instagram is you can't include a link. So, for example, if you had a press release and you just summarized it and wanted to do, here's the link to read the full press release, you can't do that in Instagram unless you have, I think it's 100,000 followers. And the percentage of people who have Instagram accounts who have 100,000 followers is extremely low. So while there are so many platforms, Snapchat, Instagram, etc., that the younger generation are actively engaged in, TikTok as well, they're not necessarily, I wouldn't get bogged down and obsessed with we have to be on all of them. Focus and master one at a time, and depending on what type of content you're putting out and who you're trying to target, then consider whether you need to be engaging in any of the other social media platforms. I hope that answered your question, Robin.
Thank you, Damien. Does anyone else have a question, or shall we round it up now? Thank you, Damien. Lots of oh, here we go.
Okay, that's Robin, really good question there as well. Again, I think for small businesses, it's a combination of both your own company account and your personal account. So if you have a number of people in the organization, ideally they should all be associated with your company profile. And potentially, what I would suggest is, if you have several people, something is published through the LinkedIn company page and then shared by the employees through their own personal channels. Ultimately, people trust people more than people trust companies. It's just human nature. So by all means, to populate your company page with posts, and then encourage your team to share it via their own personal pages, and it gives them an opportunity to put a personal spin on it as well. So person A may say, proud of this was my involvement. Person B may have a different take on it as well. But by having it published in the company stream initially, that then gives your team an opportunity to share it individually as they see fit.
Okay, There you go, very helpful, thanks. Thank you very much, Damien. And as I said, if anybody's got any individual questions they want to raise with him, they're very welcome to come through us, or if you've got his email already, do it directly. Thank you, Damien. That was really, it's always worth being reminded of some of these things, isn't it? And certainly from someone as expert as you. Thank you very much, Damien.
Thank you very much for joining us today.